In Washington, I'm Karen Ryan reporting. When is a reporter not a reporter? Hi, I'm Raquel LeBlanc, and this is Case 3. In our books, we're going to be talking about video news releases, as well as Karen Ryan, who is a public relations specialist in the federal government who hires contractors for campaign management and communications. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to actually watch the video news release that was produced by the company, or the agency, I should say, that Karen Ryan worked for. And then we're going to evaluate exactly what happened following the distribution of this particular video news release. For those of you who don't know, before we go ahead and get started, a video news release is almost identical to the idea of a print press release. It's created specifically to give to the media so that they have the least amount of work possible to get your story out there. The issue with the federal government paying for something like this is that it's propaganda for a specific cause, and there are certain rules and policies that go against doing that without letting the public know that it's the federal government who is funding the production of the video. So let's go ahead and get started. You may have a hard time hearing exactly what's going on in the video just because Comcast has a difficult time picking all of that up, but I'll go ahead and explain afterwards exactly what happened in the video. So just to be clear, Karen Ryan ended the spot by saying, "In Washington, I'm Karen Ryan reporting," which caused a little bit of concern for the public and well, initially the media, who felt as though the federal government and the agency who produced the material wasn't necessarily providing all the information necessary to let the public know that this was not a freelance news package that was put together. It was specifically paid for by the government for the purpose of, letting the people know exactly what was going on with the new Medicare program. And again, that went through policy. So we're going to look at these organizations as two different entities. First, we're going to look at Karen Ryan as an organization because she got a lot of feedback on exactly what happened, and she took a heap of the mess that came with it because of her participation in the package. Then we're going to also go ahead and take a look at the federal government because, like I said before, they did fund the campaign and really were the ones who managed the script. So they are, in my opinion, the ones who should have been responsible for following all their own policies and promotion and propaganda. But let's go ahead and get started. So Karen Ryan was the voice behind this video, the video news release. Like I said before, VNRs are produced for the same purpose that print releases are, and it was produced by the Home Font Communications agency, which Karen Ryan worked for, and Karen Ryan, like I said, received this campaign. So several other VNRs were also produced for this particular campaign, but They had the same subject matter, but they were even produced in Spanish, and they were tweaked here and there so that different journals or different medias would pick it up. So the price tag on the project as a whole was $43,000, and like I said before, the federal government did pay that fee. Um, Further research was that the protest began that after several viewers of each of the stations felt victimized, and the stations, not wanting to be at fault, went ahead and said, oh, well, it's the communications agency, and the communications agency who didn't want to be at fault said, well, it's the federal government who paid us. So it was kind of a hot potato situation where nobody really wanted to take the fall for the viewers and really their number one public to feel victimized. So federal law determines that propaganda that is being passed as news is unethical, which, I mean, everyone could probably understand. No one wants to be misled thinking that something is quite literally newsworthy when the only reason it's newsworthy is that it was produced by the federal government. And of course, being the federal government, they denied that they intentionally misled the public. So further research obviously states that the public in this situation are the media outlets who are the first and immediate consumers of the package. The viewers of those media outlets were then, secondarily affected. The government as a whole really is considered a public because only one small, brand, you could say, within the federal government was at fault for this, or paid for this, I should say. And so other organizations within the federal government kind of got the heat for something completely unrelated, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then other major public relation organizations. So they had two different organizations or communication organizations working for them at the time. And of course, both got really negative feedback for what was produced. So that obviously affected public relations as a whole, not just as agencies, but things like PRSSA and ethical-based organizations got the heat because it's saying, these people who produce this material are part of your organization, yet they're producing material that's unethical. So it kind of, gives heat on them. And then obviously there are opportunities to develop a more consistent and ethical system for producing and distributing VNRs, show transparency in the intentions, and express both sides of the situation to the public. So instead of playing hot potato with the issue, find out exactly what happened and take blame where necessary. So some of the obvious objectives for Ryan and the federal government was to express remorse. Completely doing the hot potato game the entire time was definitely not a way to get in the good public eye again. And then they should also take their time and research and disperse the specific legalities connected to their fault. So if they did end up breaking any policies against propaganda or promotions, find those and express that they did not understand or fulfill the requirements and move on. Don't, obviously don't harp on the fact that, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. Update legal and ethical understanding of video news releases. So if it was in fact the station who were at fault for not promoting the fact that the federal government paid for the information or was produced by the federal government, let's figure out who exactly is responsible for these decisions and make it right. And obviously express transparency, because right now, again, they're playing hot potato and nobody wants to feel as though they're getting, thrown in the shade for expressing the truth, or I should say, they don't want to seem as though they're hiding the truth to the public. So here's a quick quote that's featured in the book. It's from Ryan, and I think that it really is a good programming position that she would. She came out on her own, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but she came out on her own and expressed why she is not completely at fault, even though a lot of people were pointing fingers at her. So it says, it's not about playing a reporter. I've never pretended to do that. It's just about every VNR a voiceover will say, I'm so-and-so reporting. You are not telling a newsroom that this is the way the story goes. You're telling them there's a cut spot looks like and what with your information. So that's what Karen Ryan was saying. And I think she's basically just saying here that she was doing her job, and I feel as that she feels as though she's being attacked for doing her job. So I think that kind of expresses Ryan's stance on the whole situation. So programming for Karen Ryan focused on making independent statements apart from the government and her agency which I think was a really good move. She was actually advised not to do this, and she went against the advisement of the government and her agency. So I think this was actually a really good move because she was able to get the facts out. And the facts were found in the PRSSA guidelines, ethical guidelines, and she cites those to the public, and it's featured in the book, that she maintained those guidelines and she had no intent to mislead the public. Finally, she expressed a partnership with the media instead of a detachment. So again, there was a hot potato situation going on of who was at fault in the situation, and she wanted to express concern for the media's understanding of what video news releases were for and create a partnership with them, just as like they've always had been, but really emphasize that partnership. So the programming for the government started out with May 19th, 2004. The federal investigation against the Health and Human Services, VNR, did violate public publicity and propaganda prohibition. So the Health and Human Services were the people who, the organization underneath the federal government who produced these VNRs. And so they went ahead and said, yeah, okay, we did violate these rules. And because they, admitted to, breaking the rules, this caused several other investigations under other federally funded programs to come up, and those also found that they had been not fulfilling the rules. The Department of Justice, however, defended the VNR, saying that the publicity and propaganda prohibition was being misinterpreted and misused. So there were kind of different statements coming out, but all of the statements were coming out, and all of them were being publicized. And that necessarily was not a good thing for the government because no one could seem to be on the same page with this publicity and propaganda prohibition. But it was kind of, two-sided. Either you're thinking that we are misinterpreting it and that it should be up to the stations and the viewers to understand that this was probably produced by the government, or it's up to the government, the other side of the, on the other hand, it's up to the government to make it as public and apparent as possible that this was produced by the government and for the government, to, let people know exactly what's going on. So for an evaluation of this entire case, instead of allowing the media and the viewers to attack both parties for trying to mislead the public, I think that Ryan and the federal government or the HHS could have taken the bull by the horns and created a new VNR campaign that would positively influence not only the Medicare campaign, but also the use of the purpose of VNRs to benefit the public. So everybody was thinking of this idea of the federal government producing these packages to distribute to the public and kind of subconsciously cause them to think one thing or the other about the government, when in reality they could have taken the bulls by the horns and said, no, we're not trying to subconsciously make you think something. We just want you to be educated and turn this into a positive thing instead of, attacking each other or trying to deal with crisis management. And the continuous investigations that followed the case were an example of stewardship, but other than that, I don't really feel as though there was a whole lot of stewardship in the case because it kind of evolved as it went. And once this, particular investigation was finished with, another one opened up. So it was hard to say exactly when or where, this particular case ended and another one began. But really, those continuous investigations were the only form of stewardship that I found for the federal government. And because Karen Ryan was just herself, she could only, provide stewardship for herself and for the public. She did clear her name for the best that she could, and she is still working. So, last but not least, we have our works cited, and this is the part where I would ask if you had any questions, but because this is a video, it's not really necessary. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.